The thing about the supply chain, I did all the research for the book. You say, well, okay, I got a loaf of bread, but there's no bread on the shelf. Where's the bread? Well, all right. Well, for the bread, you need a baker, right? Okay. So, but you also need a truck driver to take it from the bakery to the shelf. You also need a wrapper. You got to put some plastic or paper around it or something. Well, the baker, he needs an oven, right? Where's the oven coming from? What about the electricity to power the oven? You need some ingredients. Where's the wheat? Well, the wheat doesn't come from the wheat field. It goes to a mill first and gets ground up into flour and all that. But the mill gets it from a farmer. Where's the farmer get it? Well, he needs nitrogen, fertilizer to grow the field. He needs a tractor and diesel fuel to plow the wheat, et cetera. So the point is, you can segment a supply chain and say, well, you got to get from the bakery to the store. Yeah, that's valid. But every step along the way, first of all, the entire what's called the extended supply chain is much, much longer than people realize, number one.
Correct.
Number two, every spot on that supply chain has its own supply chain of inputs and outputs so that they can hold up their end. And that's just all for a loaf of bread. So the more you get into it, again, you study this, Robert, so you're familiar with this. The way I put it in the book, the supply chain is not part of the economy. The supply chain is the economy. They're so broad, so extensive, and so many moving parts that you can model it theoretically, and there's some math that you can apply, but nobody can comprehend it all. The idea that you can sit there and direct it, which they seem to be trying to do in communist China, good luck with that. You can't actually do it. All you can do, you can facilitate it. You can get out of the way sometimes. You can stop doing stupid things, which the government is very good at, but you can't actually direct it because it's far too complex. So that's the first thing. And then, in terms of the impact on the economy, it links very quickly to the monetary economy. We can talk about that as well. We have inflation. Everyone sees it. You got a Ford F-150 pickup truck, and it used to be $75 for a tank of gas. Now it's $150. Well, the demand for gasoline in that situation is what they call inelastic, which means you got to buy it no matter what the price is. You don't like paying the higher price. You see it. You see inflation at the gas pump. You got to buy it because you got a business to run or errands to do or whatever the case may be. But what it means is that in that example, that extra $75 to fill up your tank twice a week, let's say, so $150, that comes out of something else. You're not going out for dinner. You're not buying a new dress or a new suit or a sporting event or a concert or whatever it may be. So there's demand destruction. It may not be at the gas pump, but it's in everywhere else in the economy.
Correct.
So you get into these ripple effects. So the supply chain dysfunction, which in my example shows up in the form of higher gasoline prices, then ripples throughout the entire economy. Right. So the impact is enormous. Eastern Europe, East Germany, parts of Central Europe during the Cold War, during the 1950s, even the Soviet Union, the shelves were bare. You would, if you thought there was meat coming, later in the day, you would queue up for hours just to get a cut of meat. Third world countries, I've been to many of them, traveled extensively throughout Africa, South Asia, India, elsewhere. And you see that all the time, where they just don't have things. We're not used to seeing that in the United States or in Western Europe or Germany, France, but we are now. And it's not that you go into a supermarket and every shelf is bare. That was the East German model. But you'll say, well, I'm here to get diapers, or, I like hot salsa, or, loaf, whatever it may be. And then that section of the shelf is fair. It's like, oh, no hot sauce this week, or no, a certain kind of vegetable this week, et cetera. And then what happens is interesting, because you go once, the shelf's empty. You go twice, the shelf's empty. You go the third time, and they just got a case, right? But if I normally buy 2 jars, I'll buy the whole shelf. I'm like, hey, I'm buying 10 because, I don't know when it's coming in again. I want this to last. So that's hoarding. You can call it hoarding if you want to be a little pejorative about it. But what I'm doing is I'm creating my own safety stock, my own inventory in my own kitchen, because I can't count on the supermarket. Well, what does that do to the next person who's looking for the hot sauce? They don't find any. So it feeds on itself, and it just gets worse. But to your point, Robert, it's a very powerful point. I say supply chains are not new. This Bronze Age shipwreck I was talking about, it did a coastwise trade in the Mediterranean counterclockwise, because the northern coast, the European coast, the winds blew, the easterly winds, and the southern coast, the African coast, were westerly winds. So it would make a big circle. But when they explored the shipwreck, underwater archaeology, so they found amber, which comes from the Baltic Sea. They found gold, which comes from Sudan. They found swords, which had been made in present-day Syria, Phoenicia at the time, but present-day Syria. They found olive oil, which, comes from Italy. The boat itself is made of Lebanese cedar, which of course comes from Lebanon. And there was a carving of Queen Nefertiti of Egypt. She was she was the queen at the time. And so if you say, okay, well, let's just plot that out. Where's the stuff coming from? So you go from the Baltic Sea, or, almost to, not quite to the Arctic Circle, down to southern Sudan, almost to the equator, as far east as present-day Iran, Persia, and as far west as Spain. That's 5 million square miles. So, and that was all on one vessel because they were picking stuff up and dropping stuff off. It was coastwise commerce. Well, so that's a huge supply chain, 5 million square miles in 20 different present-day countries. So they had the supply chain then. So what's new about the supply chain? And what's new, and this really started in 1989, is what I call supply chain science. That it became an academic subject. There are a lot of colleges, you get a major in supply chain studies. But it was a combination of increased computing power, new algorithms, artificial intelligence, and then new technology. So we got extended supply chains. So it was really the scientific aspect of it, the academic aspect of it that transformed it. And it developed into what I call supply chain 1.0. Which is 1989 to 2019. So that was a 30-year stretch. That has now collapsed. We still have stuff, but we're in a very muddling phase. We're going to have supply chain 2.0, the new supply chain. I talk about that in the book and what that's going to look like. But that's going to take 5 or 10 years to put together. I talked to an individual, supply chain, you get millions of people involved, but this was the guy who was probably the single individual most responsible for building the modern supply chain. And he said to me, Jim, you have to understand, it took us 30 years to build it. It took 3 years to blow it up, break it down. It's going to take 10 or 15 years to rebuild. This is not going to happen overnight. So we're in this in-between stage. But the thing that caused it to collapse, there were a number of things. Everyone looks at the war in Ukraine and Russian sanctions, and that made it worse. And then they look at the pandemic and the pandemic panic and the fascist public policy that came out of it. Well, that made it worse. But it really started, you can trace it back to the Trump tariffs in 2018, because I found some research on cargo shipments, because there are all these vessels, again, you know this from your experience, Robert, oil tankers, dry bulk carriers, other kinds of, container cargo ships, et cetera. We know where they all are, they all have GPS, unless you're a couple pirates here and there, but basically we know where they're leaving, where they're going, what they have. It's all publicly available. And this one researcher tracked it, and she could show the breakdown beginning in 2018 with the Trump tariffs. Let me just give you a really concrete example. So 2018, Trump puts tariffs on China on appliances and solar panels. So, Korea makes some, but it was mostly coming from China. It was really targeted at China. So what did China do? Well, China, U.S. and Brazil are the two biggest producers of soybeans. China is the biggest importer of soybeans because they need the protein and they don't have that much. And so China was buying their soybeans from the U.S. because they're like, hey, this is one way to kind of balance trade with the U.S. The deficit won't be quite so big because we'll buy their soybeans. Well, when Trump throws the tariffs on China, China says, we're buying our soybeans from Brazil. And they shifted all those purchase orders to Brazil. Well, that's not a phone call. I mean, you got to reroute vessels. You got to expand port capacity. You got to get transportation lanes from the farmers to the ports, et cetera. And the people who do that, the real people, real companies, they don't want a 6-month deal. They want a 5-year deal. So that was all done. But you've now scrambled vessels all over the world, changed, port entry and embarkation, et cetera, on like a 5-year basis. And so they're now, China's getting their soybeans from Brazil. What's the U.S. doing with all the soybeans? Well, we looked around and said, well, the Netherlands needs them. So we're sending them to the Netherlands. Well, again, you got to scramble vessels. You're not going through the Panama Canal anymore. You're coming out of the port of Houston, et cetera. So it's a concrete example of how, the eggheads sit in Washington and say, throw tariffs on the Chinese. But now you're scrambling global trade. That has, again, as I mentioned, taken 30 years to build. And the same thing's going on with semiconductor sanctions. And again, COVID made it worse, pandemic made it worse, and Ukraine made it worse. So we are where we are. But that's really the point. It's a complex dynamic system. You tweak one little bit and then it collapses over there. And everyone said, how did that happen? Well, the answer is that's how it happens.